Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Rob here at Smirking Gun Reviews. And if you have been paying attention to my channel, you know that I've been doing old S.H.I.E.L.D. new reviews where I go backwards after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ended this year to finish up the episodes that I never covered. So we had season 1, season 2, we're in the middle of season 3, and we needed to take a break because over on D's Reviews, where we were doing fans of S.H.I.E.L.D., we had a big, season 1 retrospective. And joining us on that video was Corrie Shoemaker. And one of the interesting things about that is that she started out in the comments section of our fans of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. And then we came up with the idea of having the fans of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, where everybody that was in the comment section had an opportunity to join a couple of episodes. And Corrie was one of the major standouts. She was, okay, let's just face it, she was the standout. She was the one that struck the biggest impression on all of us. And
it was the hat and the shoes.
It was the knowledge and the passion and all of that stuff. Everything. And so she joined us after being on the fan show, and now we just did this really amazing season 1 retrospective. And while we were doing all that, in the background, we had been planning on talking about Agent Carter. We didn't know which channel was going to be on right away. We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we finally worked it out. And we're doing Agent Carter now, and we're also going to be continuing old S.H.I.E.L.D. new reviews as well. But for right now, each week we're going to be covering 2 episodes of Agent Carter at a time, because we've got a lot more Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff on D's Reviews coming up as well. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's really nice that Corrie just agreed to come on my channel to not just give her opinion, but give the nice a female's perspective on this, because I think that this show deserves to have more than just one voice talking about it. And as many reviews as I watch, as many channels as I watch, I just don't see as many people talking about this show as it should be talked about, and also just not that many female perspectives about it. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter or little blurbs here and there of females liking the show, but it's time to get a real passionate fan talking about this, and because I'm going to need help with this. I'm going to need some help with this, because even though I've got as much passion as anybody else, I feel like your appreciation for this show goes even deeper than mine. Clearly, I mean, I could wear the hat. I could get into the costume and go full weird meta about it, but I've got a Captain America costume. That's about as far as I'll take it. But Corrie, welcome to the channel. Welcome to these reviews. I hope that you enjoy talking about this show with me. I hope everybody gets something out of your perspective here. And why don't you first tell us where everybody can find you?
Oh, well, I'm an author, so I have a author page. You can find me if you search on Google for Literature with Charm by Corrie Shoemaker or C.L. Shoemaker. It should show up. And I also have a YouTube channel called Soothing Scriptures. And if the tagline that it pops up right away is biblical bliss. I like alliteration. But if you just type in Soothing Scriptures, you'll get everything and anything under the sun. So if you type in @biblical bliss on YouTube, it'll pop up right away.
Okay. Yeah. And if you haven't seen her talk on our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan show or the newest one we put out, definitely go check those out, because I thought I had a lot to say. We both have a lot to say about this show. And first thing we need to talk about, right, is the history of Agent Carter. And I know you have, you've done some research on this, and you've got some points to bring up about the Agent Carter, Peggy Carter, to talk about with us. So why don't you start with that before we jump into our initial thoughts of the season and where we were at and all that. So go right ahead. And
absolutely. I'll just put a disclaimer out first. I'm not a comic book expert. I am not a trained historian, and I am not a costume designer. These are just areas that I am passionate about, and I have a basic level of knowledge, and I've just done a lot of research. So if you are a costume designer and you were thinking like, wait, no, that's not right, I apologize in advance. I did my best. So for the history with Peggy Carter, she's actually a bit of a mixed bag because she was introduced into the comics and then she was kind of reinvented and then reinvented again. So in the comics, she first appears as Margaret Alexandria Carter, and she's blonde. She's unnamed originally, the first comic. She doesn't even have a name. She's just the wartime love interest of Captain America. And this was published in 1966. So no name, not a great start.
No, I didn't even know that.
So in that 1960s stories, she joined the French Resistance as a teenager. She's a skilled fighter. She serves alongside Cap, but she ends up getting amnesia from an exploding shell, and she's sent back to the U.S. to live with her parents. So that's kind of
one does.
That's kind of the end of her storyline. Later, she's reintroduced as the older sister of Sharon Carter, and that's in 1973, and that's the Sharon Carter that we see in the movies. She, in that storyline, she works with Howard Stark. She joins S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comics. At one point, she's actually part of the Avengers as their support staff. She also has a storyline where she dies. She's revived and brought back from the dead. So a lot of kind of weird mixed bag of things for her. In the cinematic universe, her name is slightly different. She's Margaret Elizabeth Carter. And she's possibly named, my guess is that she's named after Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, not Queen Elizabeth, who's currently on the throne right now. The Queen Mom, her name was Elizabeth Angela Margaret Boulogne, and I know I butchered that, married to King George VI. So she has the Elizabeth and the Margaret in the name, so it makes sense time-wise that Peggy was probably named after the Queen Mother at that point. Peggy's born in 1921, we know that. And that's before Princess Elizabeth, who's the now Queen Elizabeth II, and Princess Margaret were even born. They were born in 1930 and 1926, respectively. Yeah, so she appears on the scene, like history-wise, before the princesses are even born, so it makes sense that her name comes from the Queen Mom and not from Princess Elizabeth, Princess Margaret. Okay, moving on. In the cinematic universe, her first appearance is Captain America, the first Avenger, where we see her as a determined, although slighted agent. She's not really given her dues in working in this war effort. She's assigned to work with candidates for the Super Soldier Project, which is how she meets Steve through Project Rebirth. And she's one of the few individuals who believes in Steve Rogers. She aids him during the war. She joins the Howling Commandos, and she carries out missions during World War II. After losing Steve during the war, she goes to work for the SSR, which is the Strategic Scientific Reserve, which then later is turned into S.H.I.E.L.D. And Peggy is the founding member of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she started it to honor Steve Rogers. As the quote says in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, someone really wanted her initials to spell out S.H.I.E.L.D., and that person, of course, is Peggy Carter. So, and then Marvel TV gave her a one-shot entitled Agent Carter, which showed up on the Iron Man movies. And then from there, she was given her own season. So there's your backstory.
Yeah, I mean, we should talk about that, the backstory, because in the first Captain America, a lot of people kind of dismiss that movie in favor of the later ones. But I think it's essential to the character, not just the Cap, but his the whole history of what came before. And she was such a powerful character in that first movie. She left this impression. A lot of women in those kind of movies were just the damsel in distress. They were, you know, like you saw movies later on, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you got a character like Marion who can stand toe to toe kind of with like Indiana Jones. They were given stronger roles later, but back in the day, it just wasn't so. And so, but it was nice to see them show her as capable, smart. She wasn't, just some love interest. There was respect there first. And in fact, he had to earn her respect. He had to earn everybody's respect. And so, and I think that he kind of wanted her respect because it wasn't like he wasn't going in like a love-struck little kid. And she saw how like much tenacity he had, and they kind of, to me, like were helping each other. Like he believed in her, she believed in him, and then it became something else.
Yeah,
and they didn't even, and what was kind of fun about it was that despite the tragedy of never really getting to that, they didn't get to have that first date. They never really got together. There was that connection there, still started with mutual respect. And I kind of like, as much as, as now that we know after Endgame that things happened and they got to have a life in the timeline that Steve created, that's fine. But I think it made both of them more interesting characters to never have actually been able to be a couple in their youth. They both were out of time. Like she had to figure out what to do with the rest of her life without him. And he, after he comes back, had to figure out what to do without her. And knowing that she's there, but not really there. And so they, off of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? They gave that show a shot, and they were, I give credit to ABC for even green lighting the show, despite it only lasting two small, mid-season shows. Like it was like what, 8 and 13, I think. And I give them, props for even greenlighting the show. But it's that difficult kind of thing where I think so many people's preconceived notions of what it should be, just like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where you have this like bigger cast where it's guys and girls, and nobody really gets to, like, everybody gets equal screen time. This is Peggy's show. She is front and center. She is in almost every scene of this show. Only time that she's not around is when somebody's doing little background exposition scenes where the cops have to see this or a villain's doing something. Otherwise, she is front and center. And I wish that more people at the time were able to not expect, like, I think they were still expecting what people expected out of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was superhero stuff, not spy work, not, just more backstory that's important to the characters in the main MCU. What Peggy Carter does in this series is telling us everything about like how she, like, it's more important to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. knowing all this, and also important to characters like Captain America later on. And the strength of her, like, because she showed up in movies like Ant-Man as well, and she never went away. But unfortunately, this show just didn't find the audience, and it's nice that it's finally getting new life on Disney Plus. I don't even know if were we having a discussion about whether we could even find it on Blu-ray yet?
Yeah, so second season is a bit more difficult to find. At least I've found trying to locate it for Canada and the US. It appears to be available quite frequently for UK region DVD and Blu-ray and whatnot. But yes, I wanted to touch on the comment you were making about her role in Captain America: The First Avenger in that movie, and you talked about how Steve really wants to earn her respect, and I think the scene where we start to understand who they are together as a team really is that car ride scene where they're traveling to take part in the Project Rebirth, or Steve is going to take part, and he's showing her, mentioning like, oh, I got beat up in that alley, I got beat up in that place too, and she asks him, do you have something against running away? And his response is no, but if you can't run forever, you know, it's better to take a stand. And she makes a comment about, he's talking about nobody wants to dance with a guy you might step on. And she says, well, I know a little bit of what that's like, having every door slammed in your face. And so we see that they are cut from the same cloth. They're both these underdogs, right? Steve is desperately always trying to prove himself because he's weak, because he's sickly, because no one gives him the time of day. He can't get a date because women, as he said, nobody wants to dance with him, right? And Peggy, in a sense, is going through that same struggle of, she wants to be part of the war effort. She wants to help, and nobody will take her seriously. And it's a fight to get through every single door. And we see that kind of revolving situation just come back and hit her smack in the face right after World War II ends, where, you know, she's done so much service. And she tells Angie, you know, during the war, I had a purpose. And now I feel like I'm just connecting the calls. So yes, they are cut from the same cloth. And I think that's why they're naturally drawn towards each other. They see that same sort of gumption and never give up. And even if I'm being told I can't do this, I'm still going to try. I'm still going to fight for it. And one of the really interesting scenes I like, and it's kind of a small scene that people often miss, is the grenade scene in Captain America.
Oh, I love that scene.
And most people are paying attention to Steve, right? Where he runs and jumps on the grenade. He's like, go away, get away. You know, he's trying to save everybody because he thinks he's not going to be picked for Project Rebirth. Like he's dreaming of it, but he doesn't think he's going to be picked. So he's trying to save the future Captain America, whoever it is, out of the group. But what most people don't realize when that's happening, Peggy's literally behind him and she's running for the grenade. So both of them were ready to sacrifice themselves to jump on this grenade, this dummy grenade. So they're basically both Captain America in a way. They're cut from the same cloth. And what I realized, which is really neat, in the first 2 episodes of Agent Carter, every time they have the Captain America radio show come on, they're talking about, you know, Cap's doing this, and Betty Carver's like, oh, if only Captain America could save me. And he comes on, he's like, stand down, Hitler, right? But every time Cap is in that radio section, our visuals that we're seeing is Peggy doing something, Peggy fighting, Peggy like breaking into something, Peggy, you know, unlocking something. So we're getting the audio cues of Steve in a sense, but we're getting a visual cue of Peggy. And so I thought it was really neat that the show is showing us that, hey, she's actually the Captain America of this show now. Because Steve isn't here, she's stepping into his shoes. She may not have the super serum, but she is following in his, you know, in his wake, in his footsteps, trying to do what he did. And to a detriment in a way, which Jarvis, you know, brings up in the 2nd episode of, you know, no person is an island, and you can't be perfect. You can't solve all the problems. And Peggy says, you know, Steve could, and she's actually wrong. She's idolizing him too much, and she has to learn that, you know, being a part of a team is valuable, and pushing people away isn't going to help her with her mission. Even Steve had a team. Even Steve had her supporting him. So she needs her support network as well.
I think it's really interesting when you bring up the hand grenade scene, and what that makes me think is that what they both understand is that anybody can be Captain America. It's about it's more of an attitude and a perspective on life and other people, that she could easily, you know, be in that position too. You know what I mean? Like, they're both, like you said, they're both kind of Captain America, and they both have that same ideal, that same, something has to be done. Why, if it's not me, it can be somebody else. And they, like, that's a really interesting. I really like that perspective. I hadn't thought about that before.
Mm.
That's really good. I like that. Thank you. Because again, it's like when you get more perspectives on these things, like it makes me now it makes me like both these characters even more when I realized, yeah, again, because what I was talking about in the Agents of Shield episode, that ideal that I didn't understand when I was younger about Captain America,
Mhm.
that I understand much better now. And she is exactly cut. They're cut from the same cloth. They're both basically people. As a female, she's not taken seriously, and as a weak, sickly man, he's not taken seriously. But somehow between the two of them, they're more.
Capable.
Yeah, they're better. There's people that can shoot and can jump and run and have stamina, but they don't have the same kind of internal uh, way of looking at the world that some just regular grunt soldier might have.
And the other point that's interesting is that what makes Steve Captain America? It's not the super soldier serum. I mean, yeah, that gives him the toolkit. That gives him the ability to leap like Superman and throw things harder and go for longer periods of time. But Dr. Erskine says, he's like, whatever happens tomorrow, stay who you are, remain the same as you are, not a perfect soldier, but a good man.
Yeah.
And we see that what makes Peggy and Steve unique is it's the moral compass, it's the desire to do what's right, regardless of the cost to themselves. It's that self-sacrificial of I'll lay down on the wire and let the other guy crawl across. But it's also their intelligence. Because I notice because of the situations Peggy's put in and the limited, I guess, support she has, because no one really thinks much of her, and oftentimes she's doing these missions covertly as a double agent under the wire, she doesn't have the toolbox and the skill set that she might be given as a agent working with the SOE with all the bells and whistles. So she has to be creative. She has to use pins to pick locks. She has to play up, a different accent or pretend to be like the stereotypical ditzy blonde to get past the bodyguard. And we see the same thing with Steve. We remember that scene where he's training for the army, and they say, nobody's got this flag in however many years. Fall in line, Rogers, fall in line, and he walks over, pulls out the linchpin, knocks over the flagpole, gets the flag, because he's thinking differently. He's thinking smarter. He's not working harder because he can't work harder. I mean, he's got asthma and all these other deficits. He can barely keep up with the guys that are running. So he has to compensate for that weakness of body with a strength of mind. And I always laugh at the look that Peggy gives him when she turns around. And it's almost like she looks like she's ready to kiss that guy, because she's finally found a soldier who's not only good at what he does, he's smart and he uses his brains. And she's thinking, this could be, this guy could be something. I have faith in this scrawny kid,
Yeah, no, that's why he inspires me, because that's, I always try, he thinks outside the box. And that's again like the influence that he has on Coulson later in Agents of Shield, where you've got this guy who thinks kind of the same way. But to move on now just a little bit, do you remember the first time when this aired, what you felt like when you were watching season 1 of Agent Carter?
I don't have a vivid memory of the first episode. Watching the first episode, I more have just a general remembrance or feel for the show. I just know that it was fun. I was excited to see Peggy. I was thrilled to have her back. I always loved her character. I always loved 1940s style, and then seeing a character who was wearing it made me just want to buy all the rest of the 1940s dresses and just keep wearing those. And oftentimes I'll get people ask, like, why are you so dressed up, or are you going to a wedding? Are you in a play? Are you, you know, and it kind of gave me the, I guess, courage to keep wearing what I was wearing and keep wearing those vintage hats and the stockings with the seams up the back. And my response became a little bit more snarky of, you know, like, no, are you going to a wedding? Like, I kind of owned it more instead of feeling like I was walking around in a costume. I felt more at home in my skin. So that was a fun sort of side effect of watching the show and realizing, yeah, I can like what I like and wear what I want. And if people think it's strange, well, that's fine. I mean, I like what I wear and I look good doing it. So
Yeah, and that's the important thing, is liking, you know, accepting those things, liking what you like and not letting other people's influence, you know, opinions influence you. Are there any differences now at all, like when rewatching the first couple of episodes? What do you feel like rewatching this?
I was just excited to sort of pick apart the costumes and the set design and the antiques that were on set. I love the style of the 40s and the 50s. So that was fun. I loved going back to the humor and the sort of banter between Jarvis and Peggy. I appreciated that both of those characters were kind of turned on their head, right? Peggy is very much in a male dominated world, but she's pulling her own weight like a guy. And Jarvis, on the other hand, he's the role of a butler, which would be expected of a male butler. That's not unusual for that time period, but you know, he's worried about the laundry. He's worried about making dinner. He's very attentive to his wife. And so he's kind of this odd duck in a sense for a male character, where if you put him against characters like Souza or Chief Dooley, you know, none of those guys would be doing that. They would expect their wife to do it. And so it's kind of refreshing to see Jarvis a bit ahead of the times, but being completely comfortable with that. You know, just now in our current times, we have, you know, dads getting leave to take care of their kids, which previously was, you know, not really a thing. It was usually the mother who did that. And so it's fun to see Jarvis sort of at home in these more domestic roles and kind of being the yin to Peggy's yang. So that was fun. And the fact that this is all new to him. So he's kind of the new agent with wide eyes and, oh, that was so thrilling. And whereas Peggy's a bit more jaded, she's done this for a while. And so it was nice for him to bring that newness and appreciation and excitement back into the game.
Yeah, I remember pretty vividly the first time I watched this, hoping that, you know, it was going to last for at least 3 or 4 seasons. I remember just wanting, you know, like starting with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I just want, when you crack that book open, I suddenly want to know everything. I want to know everything that came before. So anytime they talk about it in like Winter Soldier about S.H.I.E.L.D., or in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., what came before, and the few times, you know, that there was like in season 2, I think, where they actually do a scene with the Howling Commandos and Peggy Carter. I just was like, no, I want to know more of that. So this was it was filling in those gaps that a story junkie like me wants. Plus, I love that time period, even though every time I end up seeing stuff from that time period done right, I always get really horrified at how people's attitudes were towards each other. And they don't shy away from that. They could have very easily just made this His Girl Friday kind of show, you know, where everybody just talks fast, see? And, you know, and it didn't do that. And it just makes you go, you know, we remember these time periods, like we used to glorify these time periods as like, you know, men were men and women were women, you know, like, and now it's like we get to see what it's really was like. Not to say that every man was terrible, but it was like everything was such a product of the time period. It's like when when I first watched Mad Men and realized how, but right pre when women were starting to get out more, and that attitude that men had, and coming out of World War II and Korea, that the kind of attitude that was everywhere. And I really loved how they didn't shy away from all that in this series.
Mm.
And rewatching it now, I'm catching more stuff that I missed the first time around because I didn't buy the DVDs. It wasn't on a streaming service right away. In fact, I don't know if it was ever on. I think it might have been on Hulu for a while, but I was like, I kind of missed it. It was one of those, oh, I'll get back to it, and I just never did because I kept watching more and more stuff. And I'm glad. One of the reasons I'm glad we're doing this is so I can hit pause and go back to that time period where I get to like see all these episodes again with fresh eyes, and like I said, catch things that I didn't catch the first time around because I'm Mr. IMDb. I love to like see all the actors that I might not have noticed the first time around and guest stars and things like that. My brain's like just, oh, this was that and he was in this and that. And so I had a really fun time watching these first two episodes, but also just impressed again with like how they show it's Little Shield. You know, they don't have all the tech yet. They have the Howling Commandos kind of versions of the tech and
stuff that Colson would go gaga over. He's like,
yeah.
this is
yeah.
the original, version 1.0 of.
And so it's such a. I'm really happy I'm doing this now, and I'm glad you're along the way. And we are going to spend more time talking in future episodes about some of the other things that we have on these lists. But we really kind of gotta get moving a little bit and start talking about the episodes. So we'll be talking about like costumes and stunts. And I'm sorry, I'm like the notes you gave me. the screen just decided to like disappear on me. So I kind of got lost there for a second. I don't know why it won't pop up. I guess maybe I was like pressing down on it and it just started going into other emails. But we will be covering more of that stuff as it goes. I think it's nice to kind of spread some of the extra information out that we have, to have more things to talk about in different episodes. We'll talk about like props and set and historical reference on other ones, but for now, let's get started with the first episode, which is Now Is Not the End, where I do like that they put in kind of the events of Captain America with the events that she's going through, getting ready to go to work, seeing things like kind of like what you were talking about with the Captain America radio show in episode 2, where during the radio show, she's doing something, actually, instead of being just the damsel in distress. And I like that they set it up for people who don't know who Peggy Carter is, who somehow skipped Captain America, the first Avenger. And setting up the world, though, of what it's like for Peggy Carter in 1946 New York, and for women in general in 1946 New York. But really quickly, before we jump into that, I just want to mention the cast here. We've got a huge cast. It's really big. And just for like guest stars, there's some guest stars in here that almost get nothing to do, and they've been in big movies. There a lot of these faces are faces that you would know, maybe not know their names, but like besides Haley Atwell, who is phenomenal, you got Enver, who we both would butcher his last name. We're not going to try it. But as Souza, he's back. He was in this. Then he went to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season 7. That's one of the greatest bonuses for going back to this is seeing Enver back and me being more. I like him more this time. We talked about that on our privately about my feelings of what I thought of Enver the first time around. But now rewatching it, I have different feelings. James Darcy as Jarvis is fantastic. It's so nice to see. It was so nice to see the original OG Jarvis, not Paul Bettany's computer voice or the amalgamation of that becomes Vision later. You got Chad Michael Murray, who I only remembered from that show One Tree Hill, and I didn't watch that and didn't really care. But Shea Wiggum as Chief Dooley, I really love. All the way back to Boardwalk Empire, which was another, new was that oh gosh, New Jersey, Atlantic City, the story about Nucky Thompson and the mobsters and everything. He was really, really great on that show. Lindsay Fonseca, who most people know as the daughter on How I Met Your Mother, who never aged during that long story that he was telling. Also in movies like Kick Ass, she needs to work more. She needs to get cast in a lot more things. I've not seen her in a lot in the last few years, but she's really great as Angie in this. Of course,
Angie, she's hilarious.
of course, then you've got Dominic Cooper returning as Howard Stark. The only reason I think he's not in it as much is because he started filming the show Preacher, but it's great that they were able to get him back somewhat for the show, because Dominic Cooper is a really fantastic actor, going all the way back to the movie called I'm starting to forget. It's like The Devil's Bodyguard or something. I remember he played Saddam Hussein's son's double. The Devil's Double, that's what it's called. And he was considered for Oscar nominations for that movie. And ever since then, he's just been really, really good. He needs to get more stuff. But this episode also has Andre Royo as Spider Raymond, who for a lot of people would remember from The Wire. He was fantastic. He's a fantastic character actor. He's also done stuff on the show Fringe and movies like Super with Rainn Wilson. That is a James Gunn movie. You've got, sorry, this is where I really start to nerd out is when I talk about cast. James Urbaniak, who played Miles Van Ert in this, is one of the bad guys. He was one of Dwight's weird friends on The Office. You've also got Costa Ronan as Vanko. He's in one scene and he's just a scientist. But he was on the fantastic FX show The Americans about Cold War 80s and spies. And
now, was he the scientist that was letting them know what the nitramine was made of?
Yes.
Now, his character, he is the father of Whiplash.
Yes.
In the X-Men.
Yeah, and so it's like cool to like know that that's where that comes from, right? And they got it's like a thankless role, but they got a really good actor. If you've not seen The Americans, holy moly, you've got to check that out. He is fantastic on that show. And then there's one other person that I have to mention because it took me by surprise, and it's not until the second episode, but Devin Ratray is in the second episode. He's the one at the end that has the truck with all the bombs inside it.
Yep.
The bigger gentleman that ends up on the, tied to the chair and running down the road. Devin Ratray. Yeah, if you don't know who Devin Ratray is, you're about to remember him in a second because he was Buzz, Kevin's older brother in Home Alone. The one who is the bully brother. And I just was like, love that because I don't remember seeing that guy in anything besides Home Alone. And so, yeah, that's the cast. I mean, also we had in second episode, we had Ray Weiss. Oh, the great Ray Weiss, character actor who was Leland Palmer on Twin Peaks in movies like RoboCop. This guy shows up, you get a great job. This Ray Weiss is fantastic. I love him in this, even though he just gets the one scene as the head of Roxanne, which is something else we'll have to get to. But we're finally okay. Now that I've gushed about the cast. Yeah. Getting into the World War II, Peggy coming, trying to figure out where she fits in at the SSR.
Yeah.
And
Well, what I
Role of women after World War II in general. I know you have some points to say about that.
Yeah, so about, I mean, the historical reference for that time period. Yeah, so I think that it's interesting that the first episode is called "The Now Is Not the End," and to me that just spoke that Peggy still has a job to do. There's still threats out there. The war might be over, but the fight isn't. There's still something to do, and we have, it's taking place after World War II. So we've got all these soldiers coming back from the war, and the first few scenes we see with Peggy's roommate Colleen, she mentions this. She said, they let 10 girls go. I had to teach a GI how to use a rivet gun, and so they're addressing the changes that are happening in society because of this flood of men coming back and expecting to have their jobs back, and women being told, your job is to go back to the home, give up your job, and let these men work again. So there's that. It's nice that they address that head on. And she talks about, I had to teach a GI how to work a rivet gun. So she's clearly she's capable. She's more informed on the task, yet she's being forced to hand those jobs over to men who don't know how to do them. And that was kind of the reality of that time.
Yeah, I mean, the men got to come home, and while it's like, yeah, you knew that they needed to go back to work, but it's so, when you consider how almost manipulative it was to me, with things like Rosie's rivets and we can do it, and putting women to work, or whether it was in the factories, or whether they were taking over baseball teams, as soon as they were the ones running this country, they were the ones that did all this so that America could keep running, so that their soldiers would have things that they needed, and then to just be tossed aside just really chaps my hinder, because it's just like, because this was the big boom. I mean, World War II is what got us out of the Great Depression, and the fact that they did all the work. Okay, not to say that men weren't fighting and that there weren't men here working, but to just suddenly go, well, now we just need you to back, to have babies again, go back in the kitchen, just have kids. And these men who fought in a war, now they're gonna carry on for you. And it just is so condescending. It's so just like, it shows the strength of will of women, but at the same time, it's just sad that I don't want to speak for women, but it's like, if the roles were reversed and men were told, no, sorry, your jobs are all filled, you have to figure out something else.
Protests in the street.
Yeah, right. It'd be chaos. And it seemed to me like, with the Great Depression being over, that there should have been more opportunities that they should have made a better effort at making sure women's jobs and things like that didn't just go away because the war was over, even though, Korea starts soon after.
I mean, it's a difficult topic because I can see it from both ways. I mean,
Sure.
I can see the logistics of it, of there are only so many jobs, and these men vacated their jobs to go to war, and now they've come back to nothing. So I can see the logistics of it. I think one of the positives of all of that is that both World War I and World War II really were the catalyst that caused change for women moving forward. World War I was the catalyst that encouraged the women to have the vote, at least in Canada, I believe. So we had that being the end result of the changes evoked by World War I. World War II there were a lot of women who still kept their jobs. There were a lot of women that were nurses and stayed as nurses. There were women like Peggy who had worked with worked as spies and worked in espionage, who then came back and continued to do that. So in that sense, it did open doors for women moving forward. But yes, there was that sort of double standard of, yes, you've helped the country, but now can you step aside so that the guys can come back? And my family is a part of that history. My grandmother worked in an ammunitions factory in Canada to help with the war effort, and I know my grandfather was also involved with the army. So I have experience on both sides within my own family. And I know my grandmother was always so proud that she had been involved. And I told you the story about how she wasn't able to cross the border to the US to visit her at that point boyfriend, because she was deemed a necessary war time involvement, right, with her job at the factory. So she wasn't able to leave. Yeah, I mean, I think also these images of Rosie the Riveter and whatnot, they were used to bring a country together. Whether you're saying it's manipulative or not, I mean, I like that part of the history. I like that kind of we can do it. It's been sort of taken over in a modern sense now, as women can do anything and don't give up. So it's kind of been reinvented for modern times. But I always liked that kind of element of how we were able to use, whether it be lipstick or or posters or pinup posters, to kind of encourage and support the troops and to support the women at home. Because as you said, the men were on the front lines fighting, which is a whole other thing for that generation to go through. But the women were really holding down the fort at home, and everything from the land armies to flying the planes to locations for pickup, etc. So I think the reality we have to look at it is we were in the middle of a war. And at that point, all hands on deck. and however we can get people involved and have, a supportive, I guess, mentality. They used any approach that they could.
Yeah, I mean, maybe manipulative is a little too strong a word. It's propaganda to me, and I understand what you're saying. And it's easy for me now to look at it and try kind of judge it a little bit, but I just look at it like, if I'd have known that it is a time of war. I know it's a difficult subject, like you said. It's just I kind of look at it and because I just get so angry at the attitude that so many of these men had about things, or just push you aside. Like, I don't even care about, they don't acknowledge. It just feels like nobody's acknowledging the role that women played. It was just literally back to work and you go away now and just go do what you have to do. And
that's a good transition into character analysis to talk about Daniel Souza.
Yeah.
Because he's not that kind of a guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you weren't a huge fan of Daniel Souza at the beginning, and you warmed up to him. I liked him from the get-go, but I think that was because I was looking at him as a stand-in for Steve Rogers. I saw a lot of Steve's qualities in him. We know that he was injured in the war, right? So we know that he's constantly has that hanging over him. He's belittled by his colleagues about that, or at least he's the butt of the joke. And he seems to understand, or at least he respects Peggy, but he also understands her struggle. And I'm thinking specifically of the scene where she's going through the Project Rebirth files, and Souza walks into the room and realizes she's looking at a photo of Steve, and he's such an upstanding good guy that he deliberately makes noise to let her know he's in the room. And then he blames it on, you know, his crutch of like, oh, sorry, this thing, it's always a pain. And then he goes on to, I guess, encourage Peggy, speak to what she's going through, which he isn't experiencing himself, but he's able to bring his perspective as a man who was on the front lines, who almost died. And his advice to her is, don't cling on to the items that belong to someone from the past. Cling to their memory. Like, remember the good things about them. He's trying to encourage her. And, you know, and that was kind of the moment where I fell in love with his character, because he's not just thinking for himself, he's thinking about her, and he's trying to be a support network for her in a work environment where there really are there's limited options for him to do that. And we see that again, he tries to stand up for Peggy when she's getting flack from some of the guys, basically being like, they're making sexist comments about her, being condescending. And we have the conversation where Peggy says, about what you said, while I appreciate it, please don't do that again. And instead of being insulted, like, hey, I stood up for you, shouldn't you be happy about that? He respects her opinion and her request, but he makes it known that, you know, he's not happy about how they're treating her. And she says, well, that makes two of us. And that's kind of that bonding moment that we had earlier in Captain America in the car of, you know, we're both fighting this similar battle. Why don't we team up together?
Yeah, except she kind of keeps him more at an arm's length because of everything that's been going on, and just the way that, you know, the office treats her and things like that. But she's kind of like that with everybody in this, that she's like, after what happens to Colleen especially. But the big crux of this episode, what I thought was interesting, is the first case, right, that they're working on. It's not communists. It's not, you know, like, I don't know, like corruption in America, like, you know, mobsters or something like that. It's dealing with like Howard Stark and basically looking into like war crimes and things like that. It was very, or war profiteers, except in a more like techno, like, because we know Stark has a lot of inventions. And it made me really think about the way that the government went after Howard Hughes, a Howard Hughes type of guy who, you know, had a lot of contracts and involvement with the defense projects with like aviation and things like that, that the Senate, you know, said, you know, you took all this money from us, you know. But in this, it's more of like, just because, you know, they're both like, you know, billionaires who did a lot of work. And it's just because they also have the Senate hearings. It just made me think of Howard Hughes and how he went through all that stuff too. But I thought that's an interesting first case to go after one of their own. One of them that Peggy knows was not any of these things. Again, they have the wrong kind of like their perception of her. They have the wrong perception of Howard. Howard doesn't exactly help himself though with that, because he's got like the image problem, and also people, you know, get jealous of somebody of that has that kind of lifestyle, that gets to do whatever they want and can have just about any woman they want, and, you know, and also be smart. And I think, you know, I know that they're looking into him because the government's saying they're looking into him, but I also feel like that these regular guys are kind of enjoying going after a guy like Stark, who they don't know from Adam. You know, they have their own, like, the inferences that they make towards her about her relationship with Cap. They kind of do the same thing with him. And she could just easily say, you know, like, like how she defended Stark to Captain America, you know, she could try here, but again, she has to play the game from within.
Mhm.
And, you know, they're just telling her to watch the phone. She has to make this own case on her own, which I really dug, that this cat and mouse game that starts here with her own department, that they're not going to let her be a part of this case. She has to become a part of the case on her own. And that's, to me, like where the episode really gets going, is because she wants Souza. You know, Souza would be a great ally if she knew, like, for sure she could trust him.
Yes, and also she's constantly, I guess, kind of having to protect herself because I guess for the problem with Souza standing up for her, she can't have him stand up for her because that is going to have its own assumptions connected with it, right? As soon as somebody else stands up and tries to fight her own battles for her, then it's going to be interpreted as, oh, you're sweet on Peggy, or oh, is Peggy your girl now? Or oh, you're gonna, you know, she can't do it on her own. So she is very strongly telling Souza, I appreciate that you believe this. I appreciate that you're supporting me, but you have to let me fight my own battles, at least until I get some respect around here. And then once the team realizes her value, which Jarvis says, you know, if the men you work for can't see your value, I've read your war report and I've read your record from the war. If they can't see that, they're idiots. But until she's able to win over that respect, she can't really have Souza being a help in any way, because any involvement on his end is just going to be misconstrued or misinterpreted. Um, with the Howard Stark bad babies, what I thought was interesting with regards to that is they bring up the moral question of, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, right? Howard's a genius. He can create all of these things, but even he recognizes maybe this wasn't such a great idea. You know, he has to lock these items into a vault because they're too dangerous for anybody to have. And Peggy's like, why are you doing this in the first place? And yes, it could be that he was trying to invent weaponry because of the war. But yeah, she really holds him accountable to that, and saying, you know, you've gotten into this problem because you've created these devices that are too dangerous for anybody to have, which is very opposite side of the coin to how Steve deals with the Tesseract, right? He says nobody should have access to this. We need to get rid of it. We need to, you know. So it's this question of who should. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
It's almost an exact quote from, like, originally, like, if you go back to, like, Jeff Goldblum's Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park, you know, where it's like, your scientists spent so much time about the could, they didn't think about the should. Yep. You know, that chaos theory and anything can happen, and just because you have the, like, I'm sure, like, look at Oppenheimer and the bomb. I mean, when he says, I have become death, destroyer of worlds, like, it's his greatest accomplishment is the thing that he hates the most. Is the thing he created, you know, these things that nobody should have, because we advance so quickly in technology, you know, we don't even always think about the repercussions. And it's, you know, it's great that our brains work that way, that we keep being able to make these advances, but like people like Stark that just, I mean, I guess in his mind, maybe he'd think, you know, well, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to, you know, eventually get there, you know, and if at least in my hands or something. But like, it's what I also thought about Stark was kind of comparatively to the other men, is that he doesn't fully, like, he could totally set her up with anything she needs, really, but he kind of, I feel like even he doesn't quite give her enough off the right away. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, you have Jarvis. Yes, you can stay in my house, but he just still leaves her in the lurch to try to fix his mistakes.
Yeah, he's a child in the sense that he's caused these problems, and now he's bringing Peggy in to fix it, to clean up his mess. I mean, yes, he does go overseas to try to track down the other bad babies, but he's not really taking full responsibility. But we see that through his character through the whole 2 seasons. You know, he's more of a fly by the seat of his pants, have fun, think about the consequences later. And Peggy is more of the Steve Rogers moral compass, like what's going to be the end result. Another thing I really liked in this episode was seeing Peggy dealing with PTSD. And we get this at the very beginning. I loved that transition of Steve about to crash the plane, and you can hear the whistling of the plane, and then it transitions into the whistling of the kettle.
Yeah.
And just staring out the window. And we have a lot of these moments where she's kind of stuck in the past. Like she hasn't dealt with the death of Steve yet. And that's kind of the big arc for the end of this season. But she hasn't dealt with his death, and it's just something that is constantly hanging over her. And because of that, she isolates herself. And I made a note here. I said that Souza's coping mechanism from his, PTSD from the war is self-deprecating humor, where he makes fun of himself. He has that line about, the chaplain emptied out my locker, can't find my leg anywhere. And so he's using this kind of self-deprecating humor to make Peggy feel more at ease, but that's how he deals with his inner demons in a sense. And with Peggy, she is dealing with the fact that being an agent, she's putting people's lives at risk. Her first roommate, Colleen, gets shot and murdered because of her. And I loved having those moments where, she breaks down crying, sitting at the side of Colleen's bed, where we see that this isn't a woman who can handle everything. She's a human being. She has weaknesses. She has emotions. She breaks down because of things that happen. And because of that, one of the negative consequences of that is that she pushes people away. She's trying to protect everybody. And by doing that, she's endangering herself and endangering others, ironically. And Jarvis has this great quote that I absolutely love. I wrote it down, if I can find it here, where he talks exactly about that. He says, your line of work requires support, people who care about you, about your well-being, who will be there to stitch up your wounds. And Peggy says, if I allow people to get close to me, I put them in danger. Jarvis responds, so your solution is to remove yourself from the world you wish to protect. Where's the sense in that? There is not a man or a woman, no matter how fit he or she may be, who is capable of carrying the entire world on their shoulders. From what Mr. Stark has told me, Captain Rogers relied heavily on you for courage, strategy, and moral guidance. You were his support. Your desire to help others is noble, but I doubt you will find much success unless you allow others to help you.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's kind of the crux of the issue is she's determined to be Steve's second. He's gone. She's going to do everything she can to continue carrying his shield, literally and figuratively. And Jarvis needs to be this sort of voice of logic saying, you, as great as you are, Peggy, as wonderful as you are, you can't do this all on your own. And I think, if I can speak plainly, I think that's one of the problems of feminism when it first came in, was this idea of we are women heroes, we can do everything. We don't need anybody. We don't need men. Just steamroll over everybody else. And the reality is, as a human being, not as a woman, as a human being, you can't do that. No man is an island. No woman is an island. You need a support network. That's why we have this thing called family. That's why we have this thing called husband and wife. That's why we have friends, is this support network. And so being a strong, independent woman, as Colleen puts it, doesn't mean you have to do it on your own. And you're probably most definitely going to be stronger if you have a team behind you. And that's kind of the change that we see in season 2 of Peggy Carter, Agent Carter, is that she now has this team behind her with Ruth and Souza and everybody else. And she does better because of it. So.
One of the really fun scenes in episode 1 is when she goes undercover as in blonde, in a blonde wig to, infiltrate Spider Raymond's club to get information about the formula and what's actually going on with this nitramine. And I really like this because it does something for the character that is like, I can't just walk in there as myself, of course. She goes in there and plays up what people think is, the way to just be just an object, to be, to be used by whoever, and play that up to get what she needs to get done. And how just it always just works. And the thing is like it works, like you could say it's a trope, you could say it's a cliche, but the thing is that in reality, that's what works. Mm-hmm. And it's sad that that's the way the world works, but it's a lot of fun. And then, like that whole scene leads up to the SSR, her having to evade her own people. Like I said, like this whole cat and mouse game that she has with her own people is one of the most interesting parts of the show, because like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. work together. It's a family, it's a group. She doesn't have the family yet, like you said, like she will get. So now it's just watching somebody on their own having to be a spy in her own agency. It's crazy. And then leading to that great scene where she has to defuse this bomb in her own bathroom with like perfume. And I mean, literally this whole place could just implode on her. Her hair is soaked. It literally, she has just gone through hell, and no one will ever know what she just did. And it's such a great way that it starts out with just all the things that she had to do in this one night. Is amazing.
And what I love about that is she is using things that are traditionally and stereotypically associated with women to get the job done. So, she uses lipstick. That is a very female image, and it has a drug in it that knocks Spider out. She uses like a pin to pick the lock in Souza's desk. She eavesdrops on the conversation by bringing in the coffee and playing the role that they expect her to, which is, hey, sweetheart, darling, get the sandwiches, order the coffee. So she takes on that role. She overhears that Spider really likes blondes, and that's the only thing he lets slide is money and blondes. And so she wears a blonde wig and she plays up that role. So I love that she's using things that are traditionally feminine and subverting them to become elements of spy work. She's literally using the kitchen sink and baking ingredients, that would traditionally be used to make a cake to defuse a bomb and save the world. And so that I think is great that she's able to do that. And you mentioned again playing these roles, like the inspector with the dairy company. She takes something that Stark or Howard Stark uses as a sexual object. Jarvis says Mr. Stark likes to use an element of like theatrical play to his lovemaking. So he's got all these outfits and she's looking at them, and then she finds the lab coat and the stethoscope and goes, oh, this will work, and then uses it to subvert and to gain information about the case. So I love how she's forced to think outside of the box, as you mentioned, and take these items that are traditionally feminine and or used in other ways and sort of revamp them for her spy kit, for her toolkit. And the other thing I wanted to briefly discuss was some of the like condescending comments that we come across in in the episodes, which you mentioned. You know, it was kind of frustrating for you to see those, and even her boss, Chief Julie, tells her, you know, let the professionals decide who's worth going after. Cover the phones, right? And she's literally come from serving during World War II as an agent, an undercover agent. And a lot of women at that time during World War II were working in coding. They were, you know, they were working as spies. And there's one lady that I looked up. She was known as the White Mouse because she was able to evade capture constantly. And I think her name was Nancy. I don't remember the last name, but she's this famous spy who worked during World War II, a young female in her like teens, I believe, and she used to bike across occupied France and across areas that were obviously occupied by the Nazis, and she would send coded messages by radio, and she only had so much window of time that she could send this message, and then she would be found out. And so there are these amazing stories of women doing this kind of work in the war, and then we come back to Agent Carter and she's being treated like this. You know, Thompson says, filing, yeah, you're so much better at this kind of thing, and then he calls her kid. Thanks, kid. Which is similar to, you know, a guy being called thanks, boy. Hey, boy, come over here. You know, and then when they go to Roxxon, the CEO obviously assumes she's a secretary. He says, I didn't think our team had such good taste in secretaries. What's your name, darling? Yeah. Agent. And then they're talking about her body, about her physique, but not about her mind or her skill set. So she becomes objectified, and Souza points this out. Like, he's the only one who gets angry about it, and he says, "You're an agent. They treat you like a secretary." So, yeah. And then what else is it? Yeah. So this uses these stereotypes to kind of deal with that at the office. As I mentioned, like they're delivering the coffee. She dances at the club to avoid Thompson recognizing her. And to not have a photo taken. So she's doing these very, you know, traditionally female roles, but using it in a agent manner, right?
Yeah, the strength that it takes from her to be able to turn the other cheek and use, you know, allow them to think and say what they want while she manipulates you know, things in her own way, you know, while she goes in to pour the coffee to get information. Although I do like the guys like, you know, what are you doing over there? You're taking a long time with that coffee. You know, they're not idiots at this, you know, well, they're somewhat idiots, but they're not idiots about the job. You know, they do know certain things. But yeah. I like that the strength that it would take, and I guess you have to say that about most of the women in that time period, is having to try to work the system from within. I did, you know, not every housewife was just a housewife. There are plenty of stories of women that did things that we don't even take, you know, we take for granted in these situations. And Peggy's just, you know, the fictionalized version of one kind of in this story, I guess. And I just again, like I said, it's the strength of her character to be able to put up with those obvious slights to her character, and just knowing like the confidence too of just I know what I am. I know what I'm capable of. It doesn't matter what these men think of me. Mm-hmm. You know, I already know what I can accomplish without them. I'll do it on my own if I have to. And I really, there's not many characters like that on TV ever. You know, there's plenty of strong women, you know, women characters we see on shows, but a lot of them still fall into a lot of these cliched traps where they still need a man, and it's always about like, oh, I gotta have I don't know, the traditional things that these characters usually are written as, and Peggy's just not written that way. And I love that. They don't ever compromise her character to fit what they think the audience wants her to be. They could have easily changed her character from Captain America to a more subservient version of her, or a homogenized version of the character.
And we see Angie doing the same thing. I mean, she doesn't have the spy skill sets that Peggy has, but she's still dealing with those issues on a daily basis in her own way. Like some of the most hilarious conversations where Peggy says, "Is that guy a regular?" And she goes, "Yeah, but a regular what? I'm not allowed to say on the clock." Like,
and that guy in particular, that's again, Kevin Hefferman, who most people would know from he played Officer Farva on Super Troopers. He is part of the Broken Lizard comedy troupe. That it was really weird seeing him in here, but it's pretty much on brand for that actor. He's really good at playing that kind of role. I'm sure he's a real sweet guy. And that's the thing, is like, how hard is it got to be as an actor who doesn't think these ways to have to have to be this way? And I know actors love to act, but at the same time, certain roles have got to be kind of like you really want me to say this to someone? Like, like
number 1 and sleazeball number 2, right?
Yeah.
But I was happy they addressed that. I mean, at the end of that one of the scenes, he slaps her butt, and like, technically sexual harassment, right? But that was the norm at that time, and sadly, it still can be the norm today. So I'm glad they dealt with that. Now I feel like we're kind of bulldozing over the guys. Not all the guys in the show were terrible. We do have, as you said, the guys are smart. Thompson especially, he's pretty smart. He picks up on a lot of things quickly. Souza, I think, is probably the smartest guy in the room, because he's literally one step behind Peggy the whole time, and she has to actively sabotage his work to keep herself safe. So we have that scene where he's looking at the photos of Howard Stark in the boat, and she lies to him about, Howard tried to kiss her on VE Day, and then she knocked him in the Thames to try to get Souza off the trail of Howard probably left by boat.
Yeah, because he's afraid of water, and
yeah, we had to get Frogman to fish him out.
She just had it, ready to go. Like,
she's on the ball all the time, just constantly. I also love that they show her being not perfectly put together. Like, I love that scene where she's having lunch and she has her feet up on the desk, and there's the other scene where Jarvis mentions they have scones at Howard's place, and she's eating it at the end of a mission, at the end of a day where she would be starving. So she's just shoveling the thing in her mouth, and she's talking to him with her mouth full. And it made me laugh, because it's the opposite of what Hollywood would have wanted for that character. They would expect, you need to be perfectly coiffed, you have to behave like a lady. And we see hints at that later on in the episode, where even as a child, she's being told, Peggy, you have to grow up someday, you have to behave like a lady, like, stop running around with your brother like a hellion. And her mom's like cleaning up her face. And so I really appreciated those moments of her just being a regular woman who's starving and doesn't really care what she looks like. She's going to shovel that scone in her mouth, and she's going to, lick the mayo off of her fingers from the sandwich. So that made me chuckle, because, that is what we're like at the end of the day when we're exhausted and starving.
Oh yeah. It's just, you just completely. Try to finish up this first episode, we got to mention the climax and the bad guys in this. The bad guys are very interesting, because they're working for a group right? That we keep hearing about Leviathan is coming. They've got, they've worked with these guys who have these laryngectomies on their, marks. At first I forgot about this. I was like, is this some kind of symbol, to some kind of group? And I just realized, I was like, no, it's just that they can't talk anymore. They've had their voice boxes removed. And that's like that's a hardcore ideal to live by. Like that whoever you sign up for this and they say, great, you're never going to be able to talk again. Like that's like what kind of ideals, like we don't know what they really represent. We don't know what they want. But what is important is that, again, we hear the name Roxxon. Roxxon is a name heavily in the comics. It's a corporation that is kind of the face of greed and corruption in the Marvel universe throughout. It's always the go-to bad guys as far as like corporate greed, like I said. And here they are again. I mean, I think the Spider-Man universe uses them a lot. But here they are again at the center of the bad events going on, where the bad babies that we find out are these bombs, and her going in there to get these bombs, and you see we got that whole truck full of them, and how she has to. Poor Jarvis is out in the car. He wants to help. She has that tech that she uses against Van Erst to like kind of zap him out and try to get away. And we have the guy Brannis, who we find out these guys aren't necessarily friends. He even says, like, this guy's not my friend, the one who's out there doing what he's doing. It makes you wonder, like, because I don't remember all of the story beats here, but he's taking the bombs from them. Like, he's working like opposite to this group's goals. And then we have that moment where the whole place just implodes. And I thought that was for television, that was an amazing effect. The chase with the car and the flames going up, and we've seen it a million times, but it's still like, it's fun to watch, especially like if you saw that in a movie, it's like, it's every other, movie has a scene like that, but on TV, it's rare. And with the budget that they have and the way that they made it work, and it probably helped that it was a nighttime scene, so you could kind of disguise a lot of the special effects with just darkness. Thought that was great. I mean, an entire building, this huge factory, just is a ball that we see in episode 2. And I really dig that we've got this. We start this whole thing where it starts out with Stark, but now we move on to this bigger group that she's got to prove is the ones behind things, not Stark. So she's got to figure out how to get the SSR off of Stark's back, who is, in the wind, leaving her and Jarvis to figure things out and putting them in this huge amount of danger. And it's a really great ending, especially because at the very end, Jarvis has that look on his face where he's like, go home to your wife. He's like, I'm not sure I'll sleep for days, but he's smiling. He's jazzed. Like, he's actually like, feels like alive, like happy to be a part of this, even if it's like this most dangerous situation. Like he could be a bit of an action junkie at heart. And what I love is that she still continuously tries to push him. Just go home to your wife, watch Benny Goodman. This is not quite for you, but like, as we see, as the show goes on, Jarvis continues to play a bigger and bigger role. And Darcy's character of Jarvis just gets better and better. And then we get her turning the tables on the guy in the restaurant, telling him that, like, there's a lot of places for you to eat. Go somewhere else. And I really like telling him, like, you're going to be fine if I do this, but you're
19 seconds. And I'm like, wow, she has really good knowledge of medical.
And you have the very last scene that kind of, like, again, I don't remember this, and I love not remembering everything, is Jarvis and Stark's conversation. about her and makes you again go, what is Stark's? We know Stark's not a villain, but we also go, like I've said, is like he's got his own plans, and leaving her out of the loop like that. And now there's another spy element to it. She's spying on her own group to do her own things. Stark's got his own things going on. This is Agents of Shield basically, just in the 1940s and without our group, because all the different moving parts. And this is just first episode, and even though that this was aired as a two-parter, so like when this first aired, we jumped right into the events of Bridge and Tunnel. Do you have any final thoughts about this first episode? Like going into that whole the climax of the episode and the explosion and all that?
I thought it was fun that they name dropped a couple of famous actors. Like they name dropped and now I can't even remember. She acted opposite Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Rita
Hayworth. But that's in episode 2.
That was episode 2. But there was another actress who was name dropped. I liked at the end where Peggy plays the marriage card to get her interview. And they're like, how long do you think you'll be staying with us at the Griffin? She's like, oh, only until I'm married. And you can see Angie just like trying not to lose it as she's watching from the other side, totally knowing that Peggy is playing this interview just to get the place. I mean, I loved the music. I guess the 1940s style music. Angie talks about this audition that she had, where she was like two bars into "Is You Is" or "Is You Ain't My Baby," which is actually a song from the 1940s, and it was generally paired with GI songs.
Yeah, I remember it from Tom and Jerry.
Well, and apparently sung by the Andrews Sisters, and Bing Crosby did a cover of it. And the Andrews Sisters are known for Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy.
Oh yeah.
So that was fun. I like that we had Rose as the telephone operator, kind of as the front that was hiding the agency. So she's clearly in on it. And the other thing I really liked was the female camaraderie. The female characters that we had were always very supportive and encouraging of each other. Like Rose mentions, DC lines are hot today, and then she looks up and goes, "Nice hat, Peg," right? So we have this kind of female camaraderie and support, and Angie's constantly chatting up with Peggy and trying to encourage her to help her to find a room because she needs to find a new place. So it's nice that we have these characters. We have reference to Mrs. Jarvis, but we haven't met her yet.
I like it when they do that, where it's just you don't really need to. It's like Norm's wife on Cheers or Niles' wife on Frasier. It's not really necessary. I feel like you kind of, when you set something like this up, the mystery in your head is enough to leave you satisfied. Always, everybody can come up with their own version of what she would be like.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to maybe the cellist from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We
Sure.
hear about her more and then finally we get her in the next season. Yeah, so I liked that. I liked that there were female characters that were working together instead of fighting over a guy. And the fact that they were having these conversations and they weren't talking about men. There's a test that you can do with films, and the question is, do we have two female characters having a conversation that doesn't have anything to do with men?
Yeah, that's it. It's a big part of this is like we talk about for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the women aren't catty with each other. They're not what a lot of shows like to portray is just you don't even know how these people are even friends in most shows. You know what I mean? Like how they even professionally get along, or why they hang out after whatever they do. You know, like it's so the norm of to just be snotty, and instead you have characters that again come at it from mutual respect, that become family, that care about each other. And yeah, there's going to be moments where they get in disagreements and stuff like that, but it's earned, because when you care, then the anger and the frustration actually means something, not just flippant attitudes that we're so used to of just personalities clashing. You know, oh, this one's a, you know, the messy one, and this one's the clean one. You know, like like they always make things so basic. And in these characters have real depth to themselves. So when they do have problems, it's coming from a place that's earned.
Yeah, and there's a reason behind those emotions. There's there's a reason why Jarvis is concerned, because he actually genuinely cares, is starting to care about Peggy. There's a reason, Souza gets frustrated with how she's being treated, because he sees her value and that she could be doing so much more if the agency would just let her do her job. So and also I think we were talking about as well the friendship between Peggy and Howard Stark, and how that was so refreshing to have a male and female friendship that was so tight. He annoys her, but she still loves him as a brother kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she puts up with him. It was nice to have that close camaraderie without it being romantically connected in any way.
Excellent. All right. So with that, we are done talking about episode 1, and we are about to dive into episode 2 in just 1 second. All right, so now we're going to be talking about episode 2. It is called Bridge and Tunnel. Immediately, these 2 episodes did air at the same time that this premiered. This was a 2-hour premiere, so you didn't have to wait a week to find out what happened at the end of last week's episode when this originally aired. And for people who just watched this on Disney Plus, I mean, I'm sure that most people just binge watched the whole thing. But we're going to be separating these like this for 2 episodes. And the first thing I want to mention about this second episode is the director. The season premiere actually was just a director who I don't know who they are. I usually do. I usually do my research on that kind of thing, but it's just another name. But the name for episode 2 is very important, and I thought that was really interesting. Even though I think they tried to play it off like where you might quite notice who he was, because they added a middle initial, which the director doesn't usually do, and that is that Joe Russo directed this from the Russo brothers, except they called it Joe V. Russo at the end of the main credits of the show. And I thought that was great to get the guy who directed Captain America Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame. He shows up here in this episode to direct this episode. And you can see that there's a lot of good cinematic quality to this episode as well. And one of the things that Russo's always been good at is doing ensembles. And there's a lot of people to direct in this episode. And these guys are from TV. The Russo brothers are from TV, so that makes sense. But it's nice to see, like, when Joss Whedon directed the first episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., when you know that they care about it. It's clear that the Russo brothers, care about this material just as much as like other things that they do. And so it shows. Like I like that. And I didn't catch that at the time, because I don't even think I think Winter Soldier had come out, but again, at the time, the Russo brothers weren't as known by a lot of people, because they were, before Winter Soldier, they had done like a lot of episodes of Community, which was a hilarious show, but not a lot of people watched. So I just wanted to bring that up. But one of the big things about this episode, and we kind of talked about it previously a little bit, was the Captain America radio show. The host of it being Ralph Garman, who's partners up on podcasts a lot with Kevin Smith. Does a lot of work with him. He's a stand-up comedian. He's an actor as well. He's got a great voice, and I really like this because one of the things that when I was a kid and growing up in the 80s, my grandparents got me into radio shows.
Yep.
I used to go to the library and pick up tapes of old like radio serials and mysteries, and because we used to have like passion plays that we would listen to from when we were kids, and they said, well, if you like those, then you should go to the library and get these. And I remember like reading, like listening to, being obsessed with these kind of shows and learning about like how they actually did it. And it's been one of those things, whenever I see it in a movie or a show, them doing radio programs, I really love it, because it's like seeing how, you don't always want to know how your food is prepared, it's like seeing behind the curtain, when you're a kid, you have that imagination. It's like, oh, wow, it could be Captain America, when it's just some actors standing there and a guy slapping a side of beef, or people just, tapping shoes across the floor and stuff. And this was entertainment. This brought people, together. We, instead of the TV, before TV, it was people sitting in front of the radio. Like, you can't miss the radio program. Kids, parents would all rush to watch. Well, I keep saying watch, but to listen to. They were staring at the radio, Yeah. And I really love that they added that element in here. But at the same time, I love that it gives Peggy Carter, this like through line through this episode of like that first time when they cut to her and her eyes looking at that radio like she wanted to blow it up with her mind. Right? She's just like, yeah, it's like when somebody in a movie or a show is like watching something on TV, like, can you turn the channel, please? It's real easy to do that now, but like the radio program. But I love Angie's like reaction to it. Like, she's listening to the actress. She's like saying, oh, she's a bad actress. She has no idea that Peggy's like, I don't want to listen to another line of this bull.
Yeah.
Them messing up my own life. What'd they call her? Betty Carver?
Yeah, Betty Carver. She's a triage nurse.
Triage nurse.
Yeah, what I liked about it is that it actually was very representative of stuff from that time period. When you look at novels and you look at films that were coming out during World War II, they did have this very like, oh, the beautiful French or British or American triage nurse who's helping out all the soldiers. Like, it was a very idealized image, and that was the role women were always given, and they were like, the romantic lead, but they were never the one actually doing the heavy lifting, the hard work. And so for Peggy, it's a double insult, because they're taking her identity, who she was in the Captain America story, and they're basically reducing it to drivel. And what I laughed about is that Angie's like, oh yeah, well, I didn't catch the first name, but it was somebody French beat me out for that part. She's like, hit him again, Cap. So much better, right? So we know that both of them are mad at the show. Peggy, because it's a misrepresentation of her and it's insulting to Cap's memory. And Angie's mad because she lost out on the audition to play that role. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I really love that part of it. It's really funny.
Oh, and they're selling sewing machines on the show, which was totally against what Steve would have stood for. Like, he would have been against commercializing it. He was all about doing the right thing just because it was the right thing, not making money off of, he hated doing those
USO shows.
Right? And so it's the exact opposite. I mean, Tony Stark would have totally gone for that, or Howard Stark, but not Steve Rogers. So.
No. Well, speaking of that, like what they would have gone for, one thing I forgot to mention was how it's really interesting that Cap's world and Tony's world have been so close like their relationship, I think it makes so much is so much more interesting when you see the history of where everything started, where Stark and him were his dad and him knew each other, but also Peggy knew his dad, and Jarvis knew Peggy, and all these connections that Tony and Cap really don't know about in the future or think about, like Cap, and it probably bothers Tony to no end that Captain America might know my dad better than me. And, which made part of Endgame sweet, and he got to meet his dad when he was younger. But I really like that, that they're so closely linked, but there's a distance there that they never fully get to. They could be brothers, and they kind of developed that in the movies. And that's just a little thing I wanted to throw out there. Was just I always think that that's interesting, that two guys that are so different but really come from the same kind of, they could have known each other. Like Tony could have known old Cap if he had never gone into the ice. Like he could have been Uncle Cap instead of,
the guy with a punch in his smiling face, right?
Yeah, right. He'd be like, I can't punch old Uncle Steve.
Also that Howard created the shield, and then that becomes kind of a touch point through all of the movies, even the sense where Tony wants to take the shield back. Like, my dad made that shield, you don't deserve that shield.
Yeah. Now, one thing I wish that she had just done, and again, it goes to her wanting to not put anybody in danger, but if you can stay at one of Tony Stark's houses, stay at one of his houses. Don't complain. Don't be like, oh, I don't think so. I know that she tried to say oh, it wouldn't look right or whatever, but come on. Even Jarvis is like, he doesn't even use this place. Like, nobody really knows about this place. This is where he brings his girls. And again, making me feel very much like a Howard Hughes kind of character, that because Howard Hughes was known as keeping love nests everywhere, where he would stash away girls all over California. Howard has basically the same kind of situation going on. And but when you get to stay in the Russian bed, the blankets and everything, just stay at Stark's. Don't make your life that much more difficult. I mean, I know that.
I think that was a reflection on Peggy Carter's character. That he was so determined, bound, bent, and determined to do this on her own without any help, that she's turning down Howard Stark's, mansion.
Yeah, and I guess it's a little skeevy to stay in a place where a lot of things have gone on. That let's just say that burn the sheets. Burn the sheets before you stay there.
But it just kind of reflects her character, that she doesn't want help. She's going to do it on her own if it kills her, until finally Jarvis seems to get through to her. I think for Peggy, firstly, it's a moral issue of, I'm working for you. You're under suspicion with the tribunal. If I'm seen connected with you in any way, shape, or form, not only does that look bad for you, it looks bad for me. So I don't want to be connected with you. And then also, I don't need a man's help. Thank you very much. I can do this, until she realizes actually it makes sense to take help when I'm offered it by someone who actually cares.
Oh yeah, no, her reasoning is absolutely solid. It's just, I jest, because it's just the choice between staying at Howard Stark's or this really strict girls' home. No. But it does make sense character-wise. It does make sense logic-wise. But I know that there would probably, any other character would have been like, I'm not staying where, with all these rules, when I can just come and go as I please at Stark's house. But it is also for the plot too, to give her another thing to have to wrestle around, is getting in and around the housefrau while she's trying to get things done, and it creates more drama for the plot. It creates more conflict for the plot. But then the crux of this episode is them trying to figure out what happened at Roxanne.
Yes.
And who could have done it, and them tracking down, her Dooley and Thompson tracking down who this is, and that leads them to Roxanne, where we meet Ray Weiss's character, who again, like I said, I gushed because this guy is such a great actor, even when he's being slimy and condescending, and you know that he's bad, and Ray Weiss is so good at playing that smiling. It's that what's that line? One can smile and still be a villain. And he's just got that delicious, just that behind that smile is something really bad, and of course, if that's not if you don't know that, like, drinks at 10:45 in the morning, even the cops that, like, in a lot of shows would be like, sure, like in Mad Men, and for Mad Men at 10:45 they're pounding the booze, right? But these guys were even like, what? It's 10:45 in the morning, and what is his answer? Oh, you just need a giant ice cube.
Plus, it's a really good sort of foil to Howard Stark, because we see Howard Stark, the millionaire, the genius, but trying to be a good guy. And then we've got this dude who's also running a company, ranking in the cash, and we know that something's not right behind the scenes.
It would have been even more fitting if his last name was Hammer. Like, so then you'd have another connection to Iron Man 2 with Justin Hammer, played by Sam Rockwell, if he had maybe had been his grandfather or something like that. But this leads them to trying to track down, they're trying to track down the Vita radiation. We get the scene where he's condescends about who she is, and she has to put him in his place, that she's an agent. But if you notice, she says it, he is nonplussed by it. That's how he still doesn't register. He's like, oh, that's great, darling, whatever you say, but he also seems kind of amused by her because she is standing there confident in his office. So when the guys start to later on,
he does kind of help her. I mean, when the one guy makes a run for it, she asks him, where does this lead? Where's the stairs? And he tells her, so he helps her in a sense.
Yeah. And he notices the other guys tear off without thinking. We just got to chase him. She stands still calmly. Where does that lead? Oh, stairwell? Right over there. And it's just, he sees she's got brains. Those guys just tore off. And literally the guy who ran away went in a way longer way to escape than he needed to. And so she's able to cut him off and take him out at the knees, and is able to go anything else you guys need from me today? That's just a great moment. Also, just how she pulled that off, and in general, is that she, when she first tests her own clothes, she goes in the bathroom and she finds out it's the watch, which makes sense then. In the if we didn't have that scene, what she does next wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so she takes off the watch and throws it away. Sorry, Nana. Hopefully she went back and got it later. That was a nice watch. But gives her the idea that she knows who this guy is. Since she flashed him with the lights, he clearly doesn't remember her, and is able to say, wait a minute, you need to come back. And just in her brain is
she puts two and two together and realizes
to make her argument make sense.
Yeah.
And just, that's fantastic storytelling to put in this moment that seems like nothing. What do we know here? Just that, she's trying to protect herself. And then she uses that information to turn the tables on a guy who's about to get away, who's smiling and ready to go, ha, 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 you guys got nothing on me. And then say, well, yeah, he could easily wash it off. They take showers here, wear their clothes. And, the guy probably could have tried to play it off a little cooler other than just bolt. But that's another great scene that just shows how, and like you said, eventually Chief Dooley does start to see these things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it was really.
Also the Vita rays, which were used for the Captain America, to activate the Captain America serum. So we have that storyline coming back into play. Dr. Erkston, it says that his name on the little grader.
But we also see how she's better at certain things, like, again, showing how the guys handle things. Like, they get Van Ert in custody, and instead of really interrogating him, they put the carrot or the stick down, literally, which I thought was funny. But the fact that they literally have a carrot and a stick sitting around somewhere, like, hey, we got a special case here, need the carrot and the stick brought in. But they literally just go to mercilessly beating this guy for information rather than trying to detect, to try to actually get information from him the right way. Like nowadays, we see this, and I think we're going to see a lot of changes probably in the way things are portrayed on television now that this has become finally a hot button target issue in America and the world, is how you treat people in custody or about to be in custody. And that time period, where it was just beat it out of somebody,
rail on them, as opposed to, I think for me, what I immediately thought of was to Dottie from season 2, of how her interrogation tactics are so different. When you look at the interrogation between Dottie and Peggy of season 2, where she's like, "Oh, I missed you," and they're just playing this cat and mouse game of language to try to figure each other out, versus what we see in season 1, where Dooley basically gives you the good cop, bad cop routine and doesn't want to dig any deeper. I think if we'd put Phil Coulson in that interrogation room, how different that scene would have gone, because he would have figured out what was going on with this guy. So yeah, that was just my 2 cents.
Which leads them, like they end up going after this Mr. McPhee. They track him, huh?
The milk truck scene.
The milk trucks. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. You kind of mentioned it, and then I forgot that she goes in there to track. This is how we even get to all the rest of that stuff, is her going undercover. I really liked her personality change and how she was able to lose the accent and just so confident. And like literally so much of life is confidence, and how you can make people do what you want with just the right tone of voice and the right amount of confidence. I really like that a lot. And she was having, it must be so much fun for the actress to just be able to put on those many, different kinds of roles throughout, it's like, again, low tech Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but in like, also this is kind of like low tech Alias, the Jennifer Garner show. Where she was always having to go undercover, except in, now with Alias in the early 2000s, it was all high tech gadgets and wigs, and she could go anywhere and do anything. And in this, it was like literally just what you had laying around. She finds the lab coat. She had to get a wig, like they didn't have that for her. She had to get all this stuff on her own, just kind of do it yourself spy work. Again, showing how resourceful she is.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It just shows what she can do with what little she has. That she is an excellent agent because of her ingenuity and her creativity, and also just how you said, people, if you go in with an air of confidence, none of those guys question her. She's like, have you ever heard of the, I'm here from this company and I'm looking into this, and you better hope I don't find the milk with the cheese. She has such sass and attitude, and these guys they're terrified because, she brings in a name that has authority, right? The New York, whatever it was, I don't remember off the top of my head, but she has the power,
the association or whatever.
Yeah, the power to shut them down, right? So they're concerned about making sure the company stays, making sure they're not fined. They don't really think about why she's there, if she was approved. But it also is I guess, the reality of that time, where you mentioned Alias, they have all these high-tech gadgets. In the 1940s, 1950s, you couldn't just pull it up on the internet and check to see who's this person, is she registered with this company, did she send a memo that she would be here. They can't really do that. So that also helps Peggy and gives her that kind of, that edge.
Yeah. So everything ends up leading them to this McPhee's house. Yep. Where Jarvis convinces her to let him come, and stay while she goes in, which gives us another great kind of action scene, but not, like it's another kind of unexpected one where she's trying to go in stealth. She creaks that floorboard just enough. I love it. It's quiet. It's tense. Like that's how it really is. Like people don't just get snuck up on in real life. You know what I mean? People actually do use peripheral vision. People do hear things and notice noises. If you're alone in the house and you hear a noise, we're wired to be like, huh?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't go right at first. She does take him down really quickly, and I love, but he's a big guy. But she's got training, and he's just, I love that she turns the tables on him. My favorite part of this, though, is Brannis trying to get away after the fact. After she ties him she knocks him out, which she gets upset about because she's like, oh, you people are so soft, basically. got to put him in the chair, tie him up, and deal with this. Well, Brannis was there and tries to run, and the car doesn't start. And there comes Jarvis. Swagger, like literally like swaggering, like, what's wrong with the car? Nothing that can't be fixed. Like he's got it like sitting there like he's the nuns in The Sound of Music that had pulled,
I thought.
Yeah, had pulled the distributor caps out. Just like, ha, ha, ha. Well, you need to put that back because I need to use this car to get out of here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I loved that they spliced the radio show with the fight scene, and the line that's said, which I had written down, but it's over there, is something about, you American women are all so weak. And then she like starts beating him, and it's just hilarious. And then the end of the line where she's like, hello, Mr. McPhee, is that all you got? And then you hear the radio show, oh, Captain America, I'm so glad you were here to rescue me. She's like, oh, why does this keep happening? Just the juxtaposition of the insanity of that radio show and then the reality of what's actually going on. And we mentioned it in our last episode discussion, how Peggy's literally carrying out Cap's actions that are being narrated on the radio show in real time while the radio show is going on, but she's the one who's doing it. Which is quite hilarious.
And so then the next thing we get is the big fight on the truck with the assassin who killed Colleen and the guy who I thought it was interesting that he's got cards already made.
Yeah.
For the conversation, like
with his typewriter, 1940.
Oh, that typewriter! Don't even get me started on that typewriter. Because that made me think of the show Fringe that had a typewriter that was the same way, where you would type something in and someone, I don't want to spoil that show, but someone was able to type back like information. Now I'm thinking that this is kind of like the first kind of like online almost. Like somehow they know what you're typing.
It's like a radio.
Yeah. That's a really cool idea, especially again, very low tech. It makes you wonder, like, what kind of technology are they? What kind of innovation? It's so innovative, but they don't know how to they don't have all the bells and whistles to it yet. They don't know how to advance it that far. But the fact that they can do something like that is like, for them back then, that's like Flash Gordon. That is like sci-fi, like hardcore, like.
And what I found interesting was that the spy gear was all disguised as other things. So he literally has like a talcum powder container and a straight razor, or not a straight razor, but a military issue razor, as his little radio antenna, which is very similar to what Peggy ends up using you know, her lipstick, right? Which is one thing, but it does something else. And
Yeah. And what I thought was interesting is that this killer who tortures this man and his wife, right? Well, he kills the wife and he tortures him. He tortures him by stabbing him through the hand and leaving him there. And then during the fight, as they're, careening off, and she pins him to the truck, doing the same thing that he did to that man. She stabs him through the hand, leaving him stuck there to die. I thought that was an interesting way for that guy to die, which was the same way, like, you just did this to someone else. Now it's being done to you, except you're not going to get shot in the head. You're going to get imploded. Not a good way to die. There's no good way to die, but that's not a good way to die.
yeah.
And her being able to throw everybody out of the truck, like she just swings down after taking a bullet into the leg, yanks Jarvis and Brannis out of the truck. And, meanwhile, Chief and Thompson, right? They find McPhee running down the road on the chair, who just sits down. That is such a great moment. That is so funny. We're just like, oh, forget it. It's the first guy in history who's chased down by the cops who can just sit down after he's caught before even getting in the back of the car.
It's hilarious because
this is going to be a good story.
It's hilarious because we've got, Peggy and the runaway car and all the panic that's going on literally like 15 feet away over here. And then we've got Julie and his group. They're just like driving slowly down the road and, completely unaware of the chaos that's happening.
Until they see the bright flashing lights and everything.
Yeah.
Which leads.
I have to, like, the stunts in these episodes are just amazing. And I know we'll talk about it a little bit more, but the lady that did this, who is a stunt double for, I have it here somewhere. Sorry, I have to find it here. So the stunt double for Haley is a woman. Her name is Kimberly Shannon Murphy, and she was in all 16 episodes. She covered for Peggy, but she was also on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she was the stunt double for Emily Van Camp and Colby Smulders on Captain America, from Age of Ultron, and some of the other ones. So, and I think she also was a stunt double for Dottie, although I couldn't get confirmation for that. But just like the stunts that they're doing on top of the vehicle, the stunt we had from the episode before where that guy went flying out of the Peggy's kitchen window. The fight scene that they did in that kitchen, which we didn't talk about, but I loved that they were using items that are associated with women, items out of the kitchen, right? Like she uses the fridge to literally have him punch the fridge and injure himself. And he's trying to, shove her into the gas oven to burn her hair and what else not he can burn. And she ends up pushing his hand onto the
stove,
which reminded me of that scene in Indiana Jones where the main villain goes to grab the piece of the staff of Ra and ends up burning his hand as well. But the stunt actor who was working as Enver's double, that was a man named Zach Hudson. He had stunt work in 6 episodes, and he also doubled for the man in the green suit that we see in this episode. And then the stunt coordinator was Casey O'Neill. So just shout out to that stunt team because it only gets better from here on out.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
So the next. Go ahead.
No. We're talking about the explosion in the car.
The last bit of this is they're trying to get information from him about where the whereabouts of the rest of Stark's bad babies. But the voice box is broken, and so
Yeah.
in typical fashion that they do in these shows, so that we don't get our information right away. This was in a unique way because the guy can't talk, the voice box is broken, so it actually does make sense for once to have somebody write something down in the dirt of a symbol that we don't know what that means. Now, I don't remember. I don't remember what that means, but it's interesting. I love that. That's another way to tantalize the audience, to give plot development, future storylines. Also, the hotel room key that Souza finds, that that's going to lead him to the typewriter, I'm assuming, so that he'll be able to, like, again, like you said, Souza's right there on the case, like with the pictures, like you really thought there is tension there, where it's like,
yeah,
clearly they think they're having a different conversation about Joe DiMaggio, but you're wondering, is he going to just suddenly go, guess what? Like, I have a picture. Is he going to turn her in, or will he? How is he going to react if he did have one? Like, there's all that going on. But then we also, like you said, you get that speech from Jarvis about allowing others to help, and her going to the girls' building, the dormitories, where the lady has all these strict ways of no man above the first floor, and how long do you want to be here? Only until I get married, or working for the phone company. How long are you going to work for the phone company? Again, that's another thing that's just so weird, because again, this isn't that long ago. Now, I'm sure that there are places that could still do that if they wanted to, but like even now, like if some lady just decided that I have a building with a bunch of rooms and I wanted to rent it out, sure, anybody could have rules for how to stay there if you wanted to stay there. But that's just so part of the time period of, like, keeping, and I'm not saying that morality and chasteness doesn't, like, whatever, but I'm more of a, people just deserve to make their own choices. And it's just so, seeing that and realizing that it's not that long ago is just so weird. It's so surreal to me, that's just a thing. That was a thing, like a thing that a lot of people did.
Yeah, she sees herself as the source of, like, morality and whatnot. But the irony is that she's the one sneaking around, poking her nose into people's lives,
Right.
probably gossiping, probably not the pinnacle of virtue herself.
It's always those characters too that do that want to hold others accountable to and not acknowledge their own flaws. You got the Mrs. Kravitzes, the ones that are always peering out the window complaining about the neighbors, when really what you're doing is just, you're invading people's privacy, and it's just like, you don't see your own fault in the things. Like, it's a fun character, and it's another way to throw a little bit of drama Peggy's way, as to her trying to maneuver in and out of that place, or people that come after her.
Yeah, we also see that Thompson is not that slow either. I mean, the conversation they have about what could have caused this collapse of the Roxxon site, right? And he's pointing out, well, wood and steel and glass and whatever, they don't all carry a magnetic charge, so it wasn't magnets, which is Kaminsky's idea.
Yeah, that guy.
And he's just like, and even Thompson's like, you Neanderthal, that's gravity. Like, so even Thompson calls out his coworker on his lack of knowledge. And the chief even says, Kaminsky, I got a job for you for your particular talents. Here, you're the Brent Force. You're the muscle. Pull this stuff apart. Thompson's coming with me. We're going to do, some more investigation. So
yeah, that character is just, that guy plays a lot. That guy plays that kind of character pretty well. I remember he was the guy in Breaking Bad that was rude at one point in Breaking Bad, and ended up getting his car set on fire, just for being a jerk. He plays that role really well. It's just not a role that I like seeing. And we're just like, oh my gosh, this guy every word out of his mouth is like the worst, but at least the thing is, like you said, they acknowledge it. The other characters are aware of it. Why they tolerate it, I don't know. But he does. But hey, being forced to pull apart a whole factory one piece at a time is pretty good punishment. I mean, he would, they don't say it's punishment, but it's punishment. Like they're giving you the work that a whole team should be doing, and you're doing it by yourself. They want you out of the way. They don't want you anywhere near the case that you're working on, but they don't know what else to do with them. But that does lead him to finding the license plate to the car, which I guess it's a little on the nose. It could be from any car, but we don't know how many cars were in that parking lot or in that area. It's a little bit of a leap, but they had to make it so that to narrow down the chase to make us feel like Peggy's on the cusp of being caught. But it's a good way to end it.
And what I liked about that is when he finds that, we have the Captain America radio show running, and it's Hitler has this line of like, "Oh, not so fast, Captain. I may have a few things up my sleeve." And so it's almost like the radio show is commenting on Peggy being in danger because they're finding this license plate. I also liked Angie's character development. We get to see a little bit more of her. I loved her sort of interpretation of the apartment for rent ads, where it's like close to.
Oh yeah, she has everything nailed. She knows the city.
Subway. She's like, that means you're like sleeping underneath the bridge. And she's so persistent and just really trying to help out Peggy, even though Peggy's pushing her away. She has that line about, you'll be my neighbor, which isn't nothing if you need a cup of sugar, 3C. So
Peggy kind of brought this on herself because Angie she knows that Peggy was involved with the guy who was bullying her at the restaurant. Like she sees that Peggy is this person who's somebody who she can trust, somebody that's a friend, a real friend that'll do like this guy obviously left her a big tip, and she knows that Peggy's a part of that. Like who wouldn't want that person around you? You're going to be persistent. You want to keep positive people in your life, and she could be the usual kind of annoying friend that kind of is always around, but Lindsay Fonseca is a great actress, so she plays it with a lot of fun and without doing like the stereotypical 40s gal. They make her fun. They make her a fun character, not an annoying character, because it could be real easy to go one way or the other on that. Exactly. It depends on the writing, and it depends on the actor that you get. And she's really good at it. Like I said, I want to see her in more things because this show's been off the air for 4 years. So yeah, people cast all these people. Haley Atwell, like that other show she got where she was a lawyer or something. I don't remember what it was even called, but it was like in the last year or so. And I'm like, you got to have something better for Haley Atwell than just lawyer drama.
Yeah.
Right. Give her something else than that. And Lindsay Fonseca, again, like she deserves a lot better than she deserves to get a lot more work. All these ladies do, man. All of them. Like even the one who plays Dottie that you're talking about, like she's a fantastic character we'll get to eventually. Yeah. As good as a hero is only as good as its villain.
Right.
And so when we get to that, that's going to be a lot of fun. But that should bring us up to the end of this second episode, where we'll be back next week with episodes 3 and 4. That's already going to be halfway through season 1 by the time we do it. So in 4 weeks, we'll be already done with season 1. So it's not even going to be, we'll be done with it by early December, I believe. Early December, we'll be done with season 1 already. First week of December.
I have some favorite quotes. I'm just going to grab them right here. I'll be right back. But did you have any favorite lines, favorite moments?
I said mine. I wrote mine down. Mine was the Jarvis stuff. that I had said, like the
Okay.
nothing that can't be fixed. Like I love Jarvis, so I really kind of fixated on his lines more than anything.
He does various lines. I liked some of the jokes that Peggy had with her girlfriends. Like episode 1, Colleen lends her that sweater, and she's like, that kind of thing might catch a man's eye, say like on a date. And Peggy's like, don't hold your breath, especially with tuberculosis.
Yeah, talk about topical too. That's a topical joke. I mean, for the time period. Now people are like, "What are you talking about?" But if you understand history, you know that wasn't messing around.
No, and they even make jokes about Peggy being an independent person. Like Colleen says, there's a difference between being a spinster and an independent woman, and Peggy says, "Is it the shoes?" Like, so she's doing what Souza does, which is poking fun at herself. And then the sort of on the nose joke of where Colleen says, you work at a phone company, it ain't life or death, Peg. And Peggy says, darling, you have no idea. Right. And then we cut to her in the middle of a mission or whatever. Howard has some funny lines when they were chatting in episode 1. Peggy's listening to his proposal of, help work with me, work undercover. And she says, you can't be serious. And Howard says, I try not to be sometimes, but it slips out. Like, just as, he even in the joke, he's not taking himself seriously. And episode 2, I love the line where Peggy and Jarvis are chatting, and she says, so I've got 2 Ford agents with no voice boxes fighting over a milk truck full of explosives. And Jarvis goes, so just another day at the office. Like, yeah, apparently. Yeah, and then these racks of explosives are distracting me from the smell of sour milk.
Yeah, that's a
poor Jarvis, just terrified in the back of that truck, right? And then that whole conversation that they have where he's stitching her up, where Peggy sarcastically says, oh, how I managed to stay alive before I met you, I have no idea. Like, you're giving yourself too much credit, Jarvis. But, that kind of witty, sort of sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek humor that we will see more and more, especially Souza. He plays that part really well with the humor and the wit. So look forward to that.
Yeah, there's that's the thing, is like there's so much banter that we could make a whole video on just each episode's banter.
Yeah.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the same way. And that's why it's a little hard for me to like pinpoint. I'll have to that's why I'll try to write 1 or 2 things that really stick out for me, because otherwise it's like we might as well put on a play for of the whole show where you just play half the parts and I play half the parts, because the writing is so good. And that's the other thing, is like, and it's sad, again, we could go on forever, but it's, I find a lot of well-written shows don't last. For one reason or another. But we're going to have fun talking about this show while we can. And like I said, we'll be done with the first season by the first week in October, or in December, which means we'd be finishing up season 2 sometime in January. So we've got plenty of content for Agent Carter fans out there. And as you can see, this was a really in-depth premiere episode. We'll probably keep it much tighter, but this is the kind of video to get a lot of the extra information out, so that way everybody knows who we're talking about, when we're talking about, all that stuff. And since this is our first one, we've got a lot to say, and it's the first time working with each other, and so it's just kind of we're always figuring things out as we go. So expect them to be pretty long, but not this long as my one friend at work is like, hey, there's nothing wrong with making long form content on YouTube. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I also have to sleep sometimes. So we'll make these a little bit tighter as we go along. But I had a really great time talking about this. This made my night. This made my day. Can't wait to get back to watching this next week and getting to talk about episodes 3 and 4 with you. And so all I got to say really is, if you like this content, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Check out Corey's stuff. We're doing The Mandalorian on Fridays. We got Fans of The Mandalorian on D's Reviews on Saturday nights. Monday, we start doing His Dark Materials Season 2, which I am rewatching Season 1 to give myself a refresher for that show, which is going to be a lot. That's a lot. That is a dense show, and I'm excited to jump back into that world. And then we got more of this and Old Shield new reviews that'll be popping up randomly on the channel, catching up, finishing up Season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So lots happening on the channel and on other channels and with a bunch of other people. And just always look out for more stuff. Again, thank you so much, Corrie, for being here. And and I look forward to doing all these with you and seeing more of you on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reviews and all that. So do you have anything else to say that you'd like to tell the audience at all, or any final thoughts?
Follow me on my YouTube channel and on my author webpage. I'm constantly writing and working on things, so check that out if it interests you. And yeah, please leave comments. We love.
Yes, comment section. Leave them below. Let us know what you guys thought of how we were doing and what things maybe we missed. I have a hard time thinking that we missed anything in this one, but in these two, we pretty much nailed everything. I think pretty hardcore. But yeah, let us know what you think of these, and should we ever do these live, that kind of thing, or we could have people's comments, that kind of thing. And, who knows, maybe I'll see if I can get D to show up to one of these too. I don't know. So, because, hey, they've got to watch it, for the Season 1 and Season 2 big, fan shows. So maybe we can pin them down for one of these or something. Who knows? So anyway,
maybe finale or something.
Yeah, something like that. We'll see. I'm gonna bug him. I'm gonna pick him. I'm gonna pick at him a little bit. See if he's but he is back at work now. So anyway, but that's me, Rob, saying have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next Thursday for episodes 3 and 4. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Be your own Captain America.
Be the shield.
Exactly. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.